Before we begin this incredible story, please take a moment to support our channel. Hit that like button if you enjoy Viking tales, subscribe for more emotional stories from a Norse world, and comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love connecting with our global community of storytelling enthusiasts. In the harsh northern lands where winter's breath never truly faded, beyond the great settlement of oak halls and smoking hearths, lay a valley shrouded in perpetual mist. The elders spoke of this place only in hushed tones around dying fires, their weathered faces etched with fear and reverence. Here, bound by chains forged from metals unknown to mortal smiths and inscribed with runes that pulse with divine wrath, dwelt a creature of legend, a dragon whose fury burned as eternal as the northern lights. The beast's name was whispered as Morghast, though none dared speak it above a breath. His scales, once brilliant as polished emerald, had dulled to the color of storm clouds after countless seasons of captivity. The chains that held him were not merely metal, but manifestations of the god's judgment, each link carved with curses that prevented his escape, while ensuring his torment would endure until the twilight of the world. Morghast's hatred for the Norse warriors was legendary and absolute. Any who ventured too close to his valley prison would face the full measure of his wrath, not through flame or claw, for the divine bonds prevented such violence, but through a presence so terrifying, so filled with ancient rage, that grown warriors would flee weeping like children. His roar could shake the very mountains, and his amber eyes burned with a fury that had festered through decades of imprisonment. The dragon's captivity had begun in an age when the gods still walked freely among mortals. A great battle had raged, details lost to time, but its conclusion saw Morghast chained in this desolate valley as punishment for transgressions against divine law. The warriors of that era had cheered his binding, believing themselves safer with the great beast contained. Yet none who remained alive remembered why he had been imprisoned, only that the gods themselves had decreed his fate. Seasons turned to years, years to decades, and still Morghast remained, his hatred growing deeper with each passing storm. The valley became a place of dread, avoided by all save the most foolhardy or desperate. Merchants would take longer routes to avoid even the distant sight of the mist-shrouded peaks. Hunters would turn back rather than pursue prey into those forbidden lands. Children were warned with stories of the chained monster who despised all who bore Norse blood. In a settlement 3 days' journey from the Cursed Valley, there lived a community struggling against the harsh realities of northern life. The longhouse that served as the village's heart was built from sturdy pine logs, its roof thatched with dry grass and sealed against the bitter winds. Smoke rose constantly from its central fire pit, where families gathered to share meals, tell stories, and seek warmth during the endless winter months. Among these people lived a boy of perhaps 8 winters, though his exact age remained a mystery even to himself. His hair was the color of wheat ready for harvest, and his eyes held the pale blue of ice reflecting sky. The child had no family name, no clan to claim him, no memory of parents or birthplace. The villagers simply called him Auric, a name given by the settlement's eldest woman when she found him wandering, half-frozen and delirious, at their gates 2 winters past. Auric's origins were as mysterious as morning mist. He possessed no memory of his life before arriving at the settlement, save for fragments of dreams that came to him in the darkest hours of night. In these visions, he heard a woman's voice singing gentle melodies in a language that seemed familiar yet foreign. The song carried notes of profound love and inexplicable sadness, wrapping around his sleeping mind like a warm fur cloak. The settlement had taken him in out of duty more than kindness. Food was scarce, winters were long, and an extra mouth to feed represented a burden during the harshest months. Yet they could not turn away a child, especially one who worked without complaint and asked for little beyond shelter and the occasional bowl of thin broth. Auric slept in the corner of the longhouse closest to the door, where drafts were strongest and warmth weakest, but he never complained, despite his humble circumstances, or perhaps because of them. Auric possessed a gentle spirit that set him apart from other children. While boys his age trained with wooden swords and dreamed of future glory in battle, Auric found peace in quieter pursuits. He would sit for hours watching play of firelight across the longhouse walls, or step outside during the brief summer months to observe how morning dew transformed spider webs into jeweled masterpieces. The boy's most remarkable gift was his voice. whether humming while performing daily chores or singing softly to himself during long winter evenings. Alric's melodies seemed to carry an otherworldly quality. The songs that emerged from his lips were unlike traditional Norse chants or working songs. They held haunting beauty, ancient sadness, and a comfort that could ease even the most troubled heart. Women would pause in their weaving to listen, and even the gruffest warriors would find their shoulders relaxing when his voice drifted across the longhouse. Yet for all his gentle nature, Alric's life in the settlement was not easy. As the only orphan among children who belonged to established families, he often found himself excluded from games and conversations. During communal meals, he received the smallest portions and sat furthest from the central fire. When winter storms raged and fuel grew scarce, his corner of the longhouse grew so cold that ice would form on the walls near his sleeping furs. The boy endured these hardships with remarkable patience, but sometimes, when the weight of loneliness became too heavy to bear, he would venture outside even in bitter weather. Walking to the settlement's edge, he would gaze toward the distant mountains where mist perpetually danced, and sing the mysterious melodies that came to him in dreams. His voice would carry across the empty landscape, a lonely but beautiful sound that seemed to echo from the very stones. On one particularly harsh day in the depths of winter, when the settlement's food stores ran dangerously low and tempers grew short from hunger and confinement, a dispute arose over resources. The eldest man, whose word carried weight in matters of survival, declared that difficult decisions must be made to ensure the community's survival through the remaining winter months. His gaze fell meaningfully upon Alric, and though no words were spoken directly, the implication hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. That evening, as wind howled around the longhouse and snow piled deep against its walls, Alric overheard hushed conversations that confirmed his fears. Several families argued that feeding an orphan with no clan obligations was a luxury they could no longer afford. Others defended keeping him, but their voices lacked conviction. The boy listened from his corner, heart heavy with the knowledge that his time in this place might be ending. Unable to sleep, tormented by uncertainty and familiar ache of not belonging anywhere, Alric rose quietly in the darkest hours before dawn. Wrapping himself in his thinnest cloak, the only one he possessed, he slipped past the sleeping forms and stepped out into the brutal winter night. Snow fell heavily, and wind cut through his inadequate clothing like sharpened blades, but he pressed forward, drawn by an instinct he could not name. His bare feet, wrapped in strips of hide that provided minimal protection, left small impressions in the deepening snow as he walked. The settlement disappeared behind curtains of white, and still he continued, guided by something deeper than conscious thought. The mysterious mountains that had always drawn his gaze seemed to call to him now with irresistible force. Hours passed as he struggled through drifts that sometimes reached his waist. His fingers grew numb, his lips blue, and his breath came in sharp clouds that quickly vanished in the howling wind. Yet still he pressed forward, driven by desperation, and a strange sense that his destiny lay somewhere ahead in the mist-shrouded peaks. As dawn's first gray light began to penetrate the storm clouds, Alric found himself at the entrance to a valley unlike any he had seen. The wind here seemed different, carrying warmth that defied the season and scents of growing things that should not exist in winter's depths. Mist rose from the ground in spiraling patterns, and though snow fell all around, none seemed to stick within the valley's boundaries. Something drew him deeper into this strange place, a pull as certain as gravity and as gentle as his mother's voice in dreams. His frozen feet found purchase on ground that felt somehow welcoming, and the brutal wind that had torn at him outside the valley dropped to a whisper that seemed to carry ancient melodies. As he walked further into mist, shapes began to emerge from the gray dawn light, massive stones arranged in patterns that spoke of purpose, their surfaces carved with symbols that hurt his eyes to look upon directly. And there, in the valley's heart, surrounded by these mystical markers, he saw something that should have sent him fleeing in terror. The dragon Morghast lay coiled among chains that gleamed with their own inner light. Even in rest, the creature's presence filled the valley with a weight that pressed against Alric's chest like a physical force. Scales the size of dinner plates caught what little light penetrated the mist, and each breath the beast took sent small tremors through the ground. Any rational person, child or adult, would have turned and run. Every story told around Norse, fires warned of this creature's hatred for their people. Yet Alaric felt no fear as he gazed upon the chained dragon. Instead, a profound sadness washed over him, not for his own circumstances, but for the magnificent creature bound in magical chains, alone in this valley prison. The boy's thin legs gave way, and he sank to ground not far from where Morghast lay. Exhaustion from his long walk, hunger from too many insufficient meals, and the emotional weight of his uncertain future combined to overwhelm his small frame. Tears froze on his cheeks as sobs racked his body, but even in his despair, he felt in strange peace in this place. And then, as naturally as breathing, Alaric began to sing. The melody that rose from Alaric's lips was unlike any he had sung before, yet it felt as familiar as his own heartbeat. The words came in a language he had never learned but somehow understood, flowing from depths of memory he had not known existed. It was a song from his dreams, the lullaby that haunted his sleep since earliest childhood, his mother's voice, preserved in his heart across years of silence. The ancient words spoke of love transcending time, of bonds that neither death nor distance could break, of hope enduring through the darkest nights. As Alaric's voice carried across the mystical valley, something extraordinary began to happen. The very air seemed to respond to his song, mist swirling in gentle patterns around him, and even the carved stones appeared to pulse with a softer light. Morghast's great amber eyes opened slowly, pupils contracting as they focused on a small figure singing near his prison. For countless years, the dragon had awakened only to rage at intruders or to endure another day of captivity. Never had he been stirred by something so gentle, so pure, so completely free of the fear and hatred he had grown accustomed to sensing in mortal hearts. The child continued singing, unaware that he had gained the attention of the valley's most dangerous inhabitant. His voice wavered with emotion but never broke, carrying melodies that seemed to reach into the very soul of whoever listened. The song spoke of mother's final gift to her child, not gold or weapons, but love crystallized into music that would comfort him when all else failed. As the lullaby continued, something unprecedented occurred. From the corner of one massive amber eye, a single tear began to form. It gathered slowly, catching light like a prism before finally breaking free to trace a path down scales that had not known such moisture since the dragon's capture. Morghast, the terror of the northern lands, the beast whose hatred had become legendary among Norse peoples, wept for the first time in longer than mortal memory could span. The tear struck the ground with surprising resonance, and where it fell, something miraculous happened. A small flower pushed through the valley's perpetual mist and stone, its petals the exact shade of morning sky. Life, pure and beautiful, bloomed in a place where only ancient magic and older rage had dwelt. Alaric's song gradually faded to a gentle hum, then to silence. Only then did he notice the enormous eye watching him, pupil dilated with an emotion he could not name. Fear should have seized him, but instead he felt recognition, as if he had been searching his entire short life for this exact moment, this precise meeting. "You sing as she did." Morghast spoke, his voice like distant thunder rolling across mountain peaks. The words emerged in the same ancient language Alaric had been using, though the boy showed no surprise at understanding perfectly. "The last to show me kindness, before the chains, before the hatred, before the endless years of solitude." Alaric wiped tears from his cheeks with hands blue from cold, but managed a small smile. "I don't remember learning that song. It just comes to me sometimes, especially when I'm sad or alone." The dragon's great head lowered until it rested on the ground before the boy, bringing his eye level with Alaric's small face. "You carry her voice within you, little one, the woman who sang to me in darker times, who showed compassion when all others brought only fear." His massive chest rose and fell with something that might have been a sigh. "She was your mother." The revelation struck Alaric with the force of recognition rather than surprise. Fragments of his earliest memories suddenly aligned, a woman with pale hair singing by firelight, the scent of herbs and healing plants, hands gentle as dove wings. "She died when I was small," he said, not questioning how he suddenly knew this truth. "I remember sickness coming to our village. She stayed to help others even when she could have fled." "She was a healer," Morghast confirmed, "gifted with knowledge that transcended the boundaries between species. When I lay wounded and near death, Rejected by gods and mortals alike, she alone showed mercy. Her songs eased my pain, and her medicine saved my life. In return, I swore an oath that her bloodline would always find protection under my wing. The dragon's chains clinked softly as he shifted position, the sound carrying notes of ancient power and divine compulsion. These bonds prevent me from leaving this valley, from actively seeking battle or conquest. But they cannot stop me from honoring my debts to those who showed kindness when it was needed most. As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the mist. Warriors from Auric's settlement had discovered his absence and followed his tracks through the snow. Their voices carried clearly across the valley as they called his name, though none yet dared venture deep enough to encounter the dragon directly. "They've come for me," Auric said quietly, struggling to his feet on legs stiff from cold and exhaustion. "I should go back. They're probably worried." But Morghast Great, I never left the boy's face. Are they worried, little singer? Or are they here to ensure you never return to burden them again? The question hung in the air like morning mist, and Auric's expression confirmed what the dragon had suspected. The voices drawing closer carried no warmth, no relief at finding a lost child. They spoke in the practical tones of men completing an unpleasant but necessary task. "I see truth in your face," Morghast rumbled, his voice taking on protective undertones that had not existed for decades. "They seek to abandon you here, in the one place they believe no one could survive. It is an old solution to problems of mouths that cannot be fed in children who belong to no clan." Tears threatened again, but Auric straightened his thin shoulders with dignity beyond his years. "Then I'll make my own way. I'm small, but I'm not helpless. I can find food, build shelter. I survived before finding them. I can survive after leaving them." The dragon's response surprised them both with its swiftness and certainty. "You will not need to survive alone, young heir to kindness. Your mother's gift to me was life itself. Now I return that gift to her son. If you choose to remain here, you will want for nothing. This valley can provide all you need, and my presence will ensure no harm befalls you." Before Auric could respond, 3 warriors emerged from the mist at the valley's edge. Their leader, a man whose gray beard spoke of many winters and whose scarred hands told a battle survived, stepped forward with the careful movements of someone expecting ambush at any moment. "Boy," the warrior called, his voice echoing strangely in the mystical air. "Come away from there. This place is not meant for the living." Auric looked from the warriors to the dragon, feeling as though he stood at the center of a choice that would define his entire future. Behind him lay a lifetime of belonging nowhere, of scraping by on scraps and sleeping in the coldest corners. Ahead stretched uncertainty, but also the first genuine offer of protection and care he had received since his mother's death. "I'm staying," he called back, his young voice carrying surprising strength. "This is where I belong." The warriors exchanged glances, relief evident on their faces despite their attempts to appear concerned. "The child has chosen," the leader said with formal solemnity that fooled no one. "We cannot force him to return if he prefers the valley's dangers to our protection." As they turned to leave, their duty discharged and their problem solved, Morghast raised his great head. Though he could not attack them directly, his presence alone was enough to send them scrambling back toward the settlement with undignified haste. Their footsteps faded quickly, leaving behind only wind-whispered silence. "And now we are both alone together," the dragon said with something that might have been gentle humor. "Tell me, little singer, what shall we make of this strange partnership?" Auric moved closer to Morghast Greathead, no longer feeling the valley's cold so keenly. "You said this place could provide what I need. How is that possible?" In response, the dragon's eyes began to glow with inner fire, and the mist around them swirled into new patterns. Where there had been only bare stone and sparse vegetation, shapes began to emerge. A shelter formed from living that grew and intertwined at Morghast's direction, its walls thick enough to keep out wind and weather, but open enough to let in light and fresh air. Springs of clean water bubbled up from depths that had been dry for decades, and fruit trees bent heavy with unseasonal bounty. The very ground seemed to shift and change, creating a garden space where useful plants could grow despite the harsh climate beyond the valley's borders. "The chains bind my movement and my aggression," Morghast explained as these marvels unfolded around them. "But they cannot prevent me from using gifts that create rather than destroy. This valley was always meant to sustain life. I have simply been too angry for too long to remember how." As the day progressed, Alric learned that his new home offered more than just physical comfort. The dragon possessed knowledge accumulated over centuries, stories of distant lands and ancient times, wisdom about the natural world that few mortals ever glimpsed. In return, the boy's presence brought something Morghast had not experienced since his imprisonment began: companionship free of fear or ulterior motive. That evening, as magical flames that gave heat without smoke danced in a circle of stones that had arranged themselves for the purpose, Alric sang again. This time, his voice carried not sadness but wonder, weaving melodies around her shared meal of fruits that tasted like memories of summer. Morghast listened with eyes closed, his great form relaxed in contentment that surprised them both with its completeness. "Tomorrow," the dragon said as stars emerged overhead, "I will begin teaching you all your mother wished you to know." The songs she sang carried more than comfort. They held knowledge of healing, of speaking with growing things, of understanding the languages that all living creatures share. Alric curled up in his miraculous shelter, warm furs that appeared from somewhere providing better comfort than he had ever known. "And what will I teach you?" he asked sleepily. Morghast's chuckle rumbled like distant thunder. "You have already begun, little singer. You are teaching me to remember what it feels like to protect rather than rage, to hope rather than despair. It is a lesson I had forgotten I needed to learn." As sleep claimed the boy, his dreams were filled not with the mysterious sadness that had haunted his nights, but with visions of the future they were building together. In the space between sleeping and waking, he could almost hear his mother's voice, no longer mournful but pleased, approving of the choice he had made and the bond he had forged. Years passed in the hidden valley, seasons turning in their eternal dance, while Alric grew from a thin, frightened child into a young man of remarkable capabilities. Under Morghast's patient guidance, he learned not just to survive, but to thrive in ways that would have seemed impossible to the warriors who had abandoned him. The dragon taught him the healing arts his mother had practiced, showing him which plants could mend wounds and which could ease pain. More than that, he learned to sing the growing songs that encourage plants to flourish even in harsh conditions, to speak with animals in their own languages, and to read the subtle signs that warn of changing weather or approaching danger. But perhaps most importantly, Alric learned to be happy. The loneliness that had defined his early years faded completely, replaced by the deep satisfaction of belonging somewhere completely and unconditionally. He and Morghast developed routines and traditions, shared jokes and comfortable silences, created a life together that fulfilled them both in ways neither had expected. As Alric's 17th winter approached, their peaceful existence was interrupted by news from the outside world. Traders passing near the valley brought word that the great settlement had grown into a prosperous town, and that its leaders now sought to expand their influence into previously avoided territories. Expeditions were being planned to explore the mysterious mountains, to map the valleys that had been considered too dangerous for habitation. "They will come here eventually," Morghast observed one evening as they discussed these developments. "Your valley, our valley, will not remain hidden much longer." Alric, now tall and strong from years of good food and purposeful work, felt a stirring of concern. What will we do when they arrive? The dragon's response carried weight that spoke of careful consideration. "That depends, young guardian, on what you choose to become. The time approaches when you must decide whether to remain hidden or step forward to meet whatever destiny awaits beyond these borders." The question hung between them like morning mist, heavy with implications neither fully understood. But that night, as Alric sang his evening songs and Morghast listened with the contentment of a parent watching a beloved child, both felt the approaching tide of change that would soon test the strength of bonds forged in kindness and sealed with tears of joy. Many seasons later, when bards gathered in great halls to tell tales of wonder and wisdom, they would speak of the dragon guardian, a healer whose songs could mend both body and spirit, whose presence brought peace to the most troubled hearts. They told of how he had emerged from the mist-shrouded valley with knowledge that bridged the ancient world and the new, teaching that strength lay not in conquest but in compassion. Some stories claimed he was accompanied by a great dragon whose scales caught sunlight like emeralds, who had chosen protection over vengeance and love over hatred. Others insisted the dragon lived only in the songs the guardian sang, made real by the power of melody and memory. But those who knew the truth understood that some bonds transcend the physical world, that loyalty forged in kindness creates change stronger than any divine magic, and that sometimes the greatest victories are won not with sword and flame, but with lullabies sung in the darkness by those brave enough to show mercy when the world offers only fear. In the valley where it all began, flowers still bloom out of season, springs still run clear and sweet, and sometimes, when the wind is right, travelers claim they can hear two voices singing together, one young and pure as morning light, the other deep as thunder and twice as gentle, harmonizing in melodies that speak of love transcendent and eternal. The chains of hatred have been broken by the simplest magic of all, a child's song, freely given, asked for nothing in return,